So, welcome to the podcast, Publishing Success, the story behind success of Brian Heckman. Welcome to the Founder Files. We're diving deep into the journey of visionary entrepreneurs shaping the industries and redefining success. In this, I'm your host and sponsor, Derek Briggs of Briggs Strategies, helping small to mid-sized businesses grow and increase their ROI. And today we are joined by Brian Heathman, CEO of Made for Success Publishing, a company that helps countless authors, speakers throughout the leaders bring their stories to life and make them impact across the world. In this episode, we'll explore Brian's built of the Made for Success Publishing firm, the biggest wins, lessons learned along the way, what's making right now the publishing world and key trends that are going to shape the business through 2005 and 2006. So, Brian, welcome. Welcome to the show and look forward to talking to you.
Well, Derek, thanks for having me on the show today. I appreciate it.
No worries. Um, well, we'll go ahead and jump right in. What inspired you to start the company?
Well, yeah, it was funny. I was at a retreat in a remote part of Washington State, and at the retreat center where I was staying, I just happened to stay with the keynote speaker for that retreat. And we got to talking about our backgrounds and our interests, and we hit it off. And over the next 6 months, we would meet at a local Starbucks in the town where we both lived. And about 6 months into it, we decided to come together and start Made for Success Publishing together, using some clever ideas that we had been discussing over the months. So it was kind of an interesting serendipitous origin story.
Okay. And was that Chris Widener?
Yeah, that was Chris Widener.
Okay. Yeah, I kind of want to read through everything and try to get as much information. So I wanted to make sure that we brought his name up at some point in time. So I thought, well, this is a great time to do it.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
great. And Chris comes from you to help you with what aspects of the business?
Well, Chris is he's a quintessential classic motivational speaker.
Okay.
And Chris just happened to have tremendous success in the speaking business. And he came with personal relationships with a lot of the top speakers in the world back at that time. So the year was 2005 when we sat down to do it. In fact, we just one day, once we decided to spring into high gear, we met in my backyard in the middle of summer. We both got on our cell phones and we started calling the top 100 speakers in the world.
Okay.
And these were big motivational speakers, people that were at the top of their game at the time. Many of them were authors, and their fame came from the books that they'd written, like Ken Blanchard and John Maxwell, or Mark Victor Hansen, who was one of the co-authors of the Chicken Soup for the Soul series.
Okay.
And so we just started marching through the list, calling these people, and we were suggesting something brand new at the time, where we were licensing the rights to acquire their keynote speech recordings and then distribute those recordings via retail.
Okay.
So, the first step in our origin story was getting lots of good content.
Okay.
And one of the early biggies that we got was a guy named Zig Ziglar.
Oh, yeah.
Zig is synonymous with motivation, and he's considered the number one brand in motivation.
Okay.
And then once we acquired, several of his keynotes, then, the industry kind of followed because Zig definitely set a tone. So I then exercised one of my superpowers, which is getting retail products into big box retailers.
Okay.
That was part of the background that I had coming into this. So we put together 15 packs of audio CDs and marched them about 12 minutes down the street from where I live in a little town called Issaquah. And Issaquah is a suburb of Seattle.
Okay.
And that just happens to be where a big retailer called Costco is headquartered.
Wow.
And so we packaged up all the materials. We had to produce the products. We had to put the products into a dozen stores to see how they would sell. And if the products passed the test, then we got a rollout.
Okay.
And so the products miraculously passed the test. And about 6 months later, we got a rollout to all their stores, both domestically and international. And in these boxes, these giant boxes, we put 14 audio CDs and one DVD so that somebody could learn lessons of topics like leadership or sales skills or public speaking skills by buying these 15 packs and then listening to audio recordings from the top speakers in the world.
Oh,
So
okay.
it was an idea that just happened to catch. So for the first, I don't know, 2 or 3 years, we were sending out these big fat royalty checks to these top name people. And then more people started to come our way, more speakers who were probably not at the top of the game, but
Right,
were
right.
maybe the second tier speakers,
Okay.
but still very skilled and very interesting people nonetheless. They started coming to us and we started licensing their content. And then eventually we took our entire catalog and digitized it and then started selling that on the world's largest audiobook retail website called Audible.
Okay.
And we were right out of the gate one of their top 10 publishers when we first came out. And this is probably back in 2008. And it's kind of a remarkable thing when you stop and think about it. So here we are. We're a, you know, we're a audiobook company, despite the fact that we never recorded an audiobook. We're competing against a bunch of book publishers, all of whom have skyscrapers in Manhattan. So these are companies like, Penguin Random House and Hachette and HarperCollins and whatnot. And here's this little company out of Seattle topping the charts in audiobooks. So, over the years, we amassed, several thousand audiobook recordings that we built. Then the digital audiobook business just took off.
Right.
And it's been growing like crazy year after year after year. It just continues to grow at an exponential rate. So now those big companies with skyscrapers in Manhattan will produce more audiobooks than we have in our entire catalog every year.
I'm
So
sure.
anyway, so it was kind of a fun beginning, but we do a fair bit of audiobook work here at Made for Success, but eventually we decided to evolve. I sat down and took a look at the numbers. And at that time, audiobooks represented maybe 10% of sales in the book industry. So I scratched my head and thought, if we're, doing all this, work and we're ignoring 90% of the market, why don't we take a look at, getting into, I don't know, like ebooks? So in 2009, ebooks were kind of new. They
Right.
represented about 7% of the sales back then. And so we jumped in and we put hundreds of ebooks on the market. And then a couple years later, we had the same discussion where, scratching my head and going, we're now doing audiobooks and we're doing ebooks. Why don't we try to get into this physical book thing? And that launched our work in the physical book space. In fact, I've got a copy of the very first book that was published by Made for Success. I just have it
Really
handy here.
awesome.
And it's called Conversion Marketing. And
Okay.
it's all about how to convert a website visitor into a paying customer.
Okay.
And it was written by some guy named Brian Heathman, which happens to be me. So anyway,
You,
that's
yeah,
this is
exactly.
what I call our test pancake when we first got into the business with books,
Well,
and it's been a wild ride ever since.
I mean, that book back, what would you say, 2009? You said you did that book?
Yeah, this book actually hit the market in 2014.
Oh, 2014. Okay.
Hmm.
And you're already ahead of the curve on that. You know, that book, I mean, just looking at the title itself was like way in advance because that's what everybody's doing right now is trying to do that in 2025, 24, 25. You know, you
Yeah,
really hit the mark, 10 years earlier than what was really happening. So that's pretty exciting to scratch your head and go, okay, let's do this.
yeah. And what was even funnier about this story? So for anybody out there that's written a book and is trying to get published,
Mhm.
right? It's hard. It's hard to find the right publisher. Hard to find somebody that will accept your manuscript and get it out there. But I put the ebook out of this book, and then I put the audiobook out because we were already doing that work and that was easy for us. But I
Right.
didn't do the physical book. Well, one day I got an unsolicited phone call on my cell phone from Penguin Random House, and they said, "Hey, we'd like to send you a publishing contract for conversion marketing because we want to get the physical book rights."
Really?
Um, so that was another kind of learning curve thing. It would, that would be a dream come true for any new author who's
Sure.
written their manuscript and now they're going through the dance of sending out their query letters and writing their book proposal. But to have the publisher call you and one of the what we call one of the big five publishers actually call you and give you an offer. I mean, that was an amazing thing. So yeah, those were back in the day, back in the day in the glory days of book publishing. Now everything's a lot harder. I
Yeah.
will say, yeah,
Well, and like I said, just a little while ago, you were 10 years ahead of your time with putting that book together. So, I mean, I'm not surprised that they reached out to you and wanted to talk to you about that. I could see it from now, just now seeing what you had written back then. I was just like, wow, he was way ahead. And thank goodness you scratched your head when you did because it definitely worked out for you.
yeah, yeah, that's for sure.
So, can you share some of the key lessons you learned from a challenge or a setback? I mean, everything you told me so far just has been, couldn't have asked for a better situation, but was there anything that really kind of you looked at as a challenge that you kind of had to overcome or a setback that you're like you had to sit back and scratch your head again and try to figure around that way because it's always positive, but what are some of the lessons learned that we can learn from you that could help somebody when you're going through building a business and putting a business together?
Yeah, yeah, it's a good question. So, Made for Success as a book publishing company has been around for 20 years. And it's one of those businesses that has defied the odds. They say that about 90% of new businesses that get started will fail within the first 7 years that they're out there. And I will say it's hard. There's nothing easy about having a business that gets up and running and gets off the ground. And I think when you talk to a lot of entrepreneurs that have somehow defied those numbers, they'll say, yes, it's hard work, it's a good idea, and all that jazz. But luck does play a factor. Now, those of us in business will say, well, you create your own luck,
Mhm.
and I agree with that. But we still had to get we still had to get lucky. So one of the big setbacks that we had, you know, like I said, we had this crazy idea. Let's sell 15 packs of
Yeah.
discs in Costco stores and see how that does. Um, and we got lucky because people looked at those boxes and said, "Wow, this is a good value and this is interesting information." So I'm gonna buy that. Um, but 3 years into that, uh, into our start, Costco called us one day, and this is in 2008, and they said, "We're getting out of the audio CD business."
Oh,
And so our revenues went from pretty okay to zero
Wow.
overnight.
Oh,
And that's every entrepreneur's worst nightmare.
yeah.
So, what do you do with that? So, you know, like everybody else that's defied the odds, you pivot. And our pivot was to go from physical retail to digital retail.
Right.
And it just so happened that we got in early on the curve
Mm-hmm.
and we got in with the right people.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I think in terms of, things, and it's hard to go through a pivot. I I feel bad every time I talk to one of my fellow entrepreneurs who's going through a pivot. It's not easy, and most of them don't survive the pivot.
Right.
Yeah.
You're exactly right.
Um, but one of the things that was gold in the Made for Success origin story was our distribution arrangements. So I lean hard into having the right companies with massive infrastructure represent our products to the market. And it's the only way you can do that if you're trying to do some sort of a mass market retail type endeavor. Because as a startup, unless you're starting with tens of millions of dollars and you have lots of infrastructure and you've got warehouses and you've got a warehouse and you've got employees and you've got inventory and all the things that go with it, you know, it's a long putt. But when you work with a big distributor who already has all that infrastructure,
Uh-huh.
they've got the employees, they've got the warehouses, they've got the relationships with all the people that you want to sell to. That tends to work really well.
Yes.
So, getting those right distribution relationships, I think, is key for a lot of founders as they're thinking about, their go-to-market strategy.
Okay. A question that I had in the back of my mind as we're having this conversation and, having all the materials you had put together on those boxes, how much was left behind that you couldn't do anything with, or were you able to market those out and sell the remaining inventory, or did you even have an inventory after that?
Yeah, we were able to sell all the inventory of those audio CDs products. So we were fortunate in that matter. But I will say, in the book business, we are always, you know, it's a hard thing to plan book inventory
Right,
because you've got to get your files all built 6 months before the product releases.
right.
You've got to get press time with your printers.
Mhm.
You got to produce a bunch of inventory long before if you know there's going to be demand for this particular widget or this particular book.
Exactly.
Um, and that's where forecasting and whatnot becomes really important. Now, today, fast forward 20 years later, um, do I have a warehouse? Yes. Is my warehouse filled with books? Yes. Is it filled with books that I printed 10 years ago and I can't bear to part with? Yes. Am I paying to store that inventory?
Yes.
Yes. Do I have the emotional fortitude to just throw it away? I'm sorry, to pay to throw it away?
Right.
No, because I'm that eternal optimist. Think, someday I'm going to find somebody who's going to, buy 15 cases of this book.
Right.
And I'm pretty sure I've got a couple cases of this particular book out in the warehouse. Um, so that is one of the hard parts.
Okay.
And what do you do with all that inventory that you overproduced? And find an outlet. Now, in the book industry, there's companies out there who sell what's called remainder inventory.
Okay.
So, if we put the wholesale price of a book like this just hypothetically at $10,
Right.
the people who buy the remainder inventory will buy this for 25 cents a piece.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Um, but you know, but that's just part of the dynamic, and then they'll go off and sell it somewhere. But that is part of the book industry that
Okay.
we're always trying to figure out what to do with our inventory that's no longer selling, or
Is
the inventory that we've overproduced.
right. Is there anywhere um, out there of like a place that you can just place them just for people to search for them and buy them? Is there any way to do something like that, or is there, you know, a company that is like saying, "Hey, we'll post the books for you and leave them online, so if people are searching for that specific book or anything, is there something like that out there?"
In theory, yes.
Okay.
So there are mainstream retailers out there that sell remainder inventory.
Okay.
Third Place Books is one of those. Like I think it's a franchise. I'm making
Okay.
that up, but I think that's right. Um, but it's a corporation that focuses in on this problem that publishers have, and they buy the inventory super cheap, and then they make a nice little margin on it.
Okay.
Um, but there is another store out there where a lot of us do sell our remainder inventory.
Okay.
And that store is called, shoot, I always forget the name of this store. Oh, yeah, it's called Amazon.com. Now, I'm joking around here,
Right, right,
but here in 2025, Amazon is our largest customer.
right,
They're larger than Barnes and Noble. They're larger in aggregate of the thousands of independent booksellers out there. And why is that? Well, Amazon, I believe, I'm making this number up, and if there's statisticians out there that know the actual number, they'll probably correct us. But I think they've got about 60% market share with physical books in the United States. This is not true in, the UK or Spain or
right.
Germany. But here in the US, 60% of the volume of books sold in North America go through Amazon.
Okay.
And then I think if you take a hard look at the ebook numbers,
Mhm.
and if you take a hard look at the audiobook numbers sold through Audible, I bet you that their market share is well over 80%.
Oh, sure.
Now, I'm just making that up
Right.
because the only people that really know that information is Amazon.
Exactly.
Um, but I've got it, I run the numbers just like everybody else in the book publishing industry. I've got my theory as to what the market share is for audiobooks, and I've got my theory as to what the market share is for ebooks.
Mhm.
And I'm pretty darn close because I got a big catalog and I look at the numbers every single month, right? Um, but it's well over 80%. So, yeah, we put our stuff up on Amazon
Mhm.
and we try to sell those cases of books.
Okay.
But the problem is that Amazon just happens to be a really competitive marketplace to sell books.
Hmm.
Okay, so last year, an estimated 4 million new titles were published on Amazon last year.
Oh,
Okay,
oh,
now a million of those copies, roughly, came from traditional publishers
right.
like Made for Success,
Mhm.
and 3 million of those titles were were self-published.
Okay.
Okay, there's a big distinction or a big difference from a book publisher's standpoint between traditional publishing and self-publishing.
A big difference.
Um, but with that volume of books being produced in 1 year, let's just play that out for a second. So, have you ever been into a Barnes and Noble store?
Yes.
Okay, so you walk into a Barnes and Noble store and it's filled with books.
Yeah,
And
overwhelming. Yes.
yeah, it's overwhelming. And that store will house, if it's a big one, it'll house about 75,000 different titles.
Mm.
The smaller ones, maybe 30,000 titles.
Right.
But but let's say you walk into a store and it's got 50,000 titles and you've got to figure out which book you're going to read. From those 50,000 titles, it's overwhelming. And you walk through and you go, oh, I want to read that one. I want to read that one. I want to read that one. But you know, back home, you've got a stack of three books sitting on your bedside table that you haven't
Exactly.
read yet.
Not at
So you got to
all.
be kind of selective. You got to be really selective. Now imagine if you walked into that same Barnes and Noble store and it had every title published in 2024 sitting on the shelf. So there'd be 4 million choices to choose from. Now it's one step worse on Amazon
Hmm.
because Amazon has not only the 4 million titles that were published last year, but 50 million more.
Yep.
So now imagine you're walking into that Barnes and Noble store and there's 50 million choices to choose from. And you're already feeling guilty that you haven't read those three books that are on your bedside table. And you don't want to buy too many more books because your bedside table, I mean, do you really want to be that person with 12 books stacked up?
Yep.
Well, there's some of people like me who are probably weird, and we do have 12 books stacked up. Um, but when I walk in at night and I'm getting my reading time in, and I look at that stack, and I kind of feel a little bit guilty that I haven't, gotten around to that third book down, which has been recommended to me three times. And, I kind of salivate when I look at it because I really want to read it.
Yes.
But I got to get through those other books that are on the top of the stack. So that's the thing about books is that the readers are a little bit selective
Hmm.
about what they'll buy.
Yep.
Okay, so that therein lies the challenge for a book publisher with too much inventory. Is that yeah? I mean, we all sell our stuff on Amazon, um, but it's really hard to sell all that excess inventory if you got too much.
Okay.
Yep.
Well, it sounds like you have a good kind of dialed in. I mean, you still have you're going to end up with boxes of books no matter what. Doesn't matter how good you forecast. Like you said, you're out 6 months in advance trying to get everything done and put together. So, I mean, I can see that no matter who you are, no matter how good your numbers are, you're going to have residual product left over, and that's
Yeah.
the one thing that you just have to, like you said, you don't want to get rid of it because you're attached to it. You worked on it. You've done so much work with it that it's like I don't want to give my work away either. So I mean, I feel that the passion is there of the publisher and putting this company together is very important.
Yeah.
And
And
you know,
let's even look at it from the opposite problem for just a second, because this is also the
yeah,
fun part of a book
okay,
publishing business.
I'm all
So
about
what
it.
so what is the opposite problem of overproducing a book? All right. So we had this one woman out of Minneapolis who was a television host. And she was on the nightly news for 25 years, and she was really well known in that market. And she was friends with people in major markets in Manhattan and some of the nationally syndicated shows. So she writes her book, and we put it on the market, and it instantly sells out.
Really?
And then I call up the printer, I print a ton more, it instantly sells out. And then I call the printer again, I print a ton more, and they go, "We don't have any more press time. We
Wow.
we're printing other projects, and you're going to have to wait a month and a half."
Mm,
So for a period of time, that book was not accessible.
wow.
And books do have a very short shelf life.
Hmm.
So that author walked away very upset, and will it's highly unlikely she'll ever work with Made for Success again, because she takes a look at our inventory management systems and decided that those were inadequate, and probably you know there's a little of truth in that. So so that's the opposite problem, and it's every bit as much of a problem as having too much inventory. So
Exactly.
book publishers are always in this weird space to make sure that we got enough inventory to supply demand and not run out.
But also, thinking about that kind of situation is, why would you think that you would go through that many books for an individual that's just a host of a show? You wouldn't have thought. I mean, you as a professional being in the business as long as you have, realizing what would be kind of the happy medium is what you're going for to try to sell something that you're thinking, well, it could potentially do something, but she's just hosts a show, and not to belittle her and who she is or anything like that. It's just, how will the book be received out there in the universe and everything. And I think that's another part that is something that, publishers have to kind of balance. We can't make everybody happy all the time. Doesn't matter what business you're in. Everybody does, the best we can in the process of going, okay, let's make an educated guess and let's look at the numbers that in this type of genre that we're looking with, that's our standard number, type of thing. And I understand it from that perspective is, I could see how that could have happened, you know,
Yeah,
and
yeah. And we're not alone. I'm sure every book publisher has the same story.
sure.
Um, and when you start talking about big high scale publishers, and we're not one of those big high scale publishers, but if you're like a Penguin Random House, let's say, and you've bought the rights to the book Spare, which was written by Prince Harry, right?
Okay.
And that book launches, and you know that there's going to be demand for 2 million copies
Yeah.
of that book. Well, uh, if demand exceeds 2 million copies during that week of launch, you're going to be hard pressed to print a million more and get those to all the warehouses out there and all the retailers, you know, in a month. So, so we've all got these crazy stories.
Well, and I think, even looking at strategizing in any business, looking at it the same way is, you forecast according to, last year or, based on specific book in that genre or, specific areas in a business that goes, okay, last year I did this. Well, this year it doubled the amount of people that were involved in the situation, and you weren't prepared for it. Those are all the things that, you know, we try to, you know, best scenario, best, I'll say guess, just as a word that, kind of throw out there is, you know, forecasting. That's what it is. You look at the numbers and you do your best analysis of making sure that you have enough of everything you need for that time frame. If it's an event that's in town for this area or any other thing, you try to prepare and order or get everything in place that needs to be. And I think that's a very important part of it. We're not perfect. We use the data that we have in front of us and do the best we can. And sometimes we fall short. It doesn't matter who we are. So.
Yeah, yeah. Well, now that I am pretty sure that we've put all of your listeners to sleep. I mean, we've been talking about inventory and shipping and logistics and warehouses. Let's talk about some fun stuff.
Yeah, and
All right?
that's what we're going to get to. I was just going to say we're going to move on past that and move on to the next best thing. What are some of the strategies driving success for your authors and publishers right now and moving forward? What are some of the techniques and things that are changing? Maybe technology, maybe processes, anything that you can think of that really kind of drive. We're going into all this different technologies that are coming forward. What are some of the technologies that you're using or you see that will going to benefit you and or the publishers and or the writers and or the authors or however you want to delegate that?
Yeah, yeah. Well, you've probably heard that old saying, only the paranoid survive. I think it was Andy Grove, who was the CEO of Intel back during the glory days of Intel. Um, well, I worked for three Fortune 10 companies,
Mhm.
and one of the companies now is virtually out of business. And this is a company that was on the Fortune 10 list. It
Wow.
had some of the massive, the highest cash balances of any companies. It was doing lots of business, um, and a technology came out and literally wiped out 95% of the company's revenues.
Hmm.
All right. And, it was a big company. And the company was Eastman Kodak, so a film company. So here I am today. I lived through that whole transition where photography went from silver halide to digital, and Kodak couldn't keep up. Now I'm sitting here running a book publishing company. And I went through all these painful lessons,
Hmm.
through the digital transition in the silver halide business. But at the end of the day, what do I sell? Well, let's see. I sell um, sheets of paper that are stamped with ink that have pieces of cardboard that are glued. The cardboard is glued and the paper is glued in there. When was this widget invented? Well, this thing called a book was invented back in 1448
Really?
by a guy named Gutenberg.
Okay.
All right. And he basically said, hey, let's figure out how to take a sheet of paper and put ink on it and then glue it together or stitch it together, bind it together, and then we'll call this thing as a book. All right.
Okay.
So we're talking about a widget that was invented 500 years ago. And
Hmm.
how long is it going to take before something comes along and turns this thing obsolete? Well, ever since 2009, when ebooks first came out, I would tour the country on lectures. And I remember I was in this one National Speakers Association meeting, and it was for what they called the $1 million roundtable speakers. And so the only people that could be in the room that had to prove that they were making over $1 million a year in their speaking business. And the day I went in there was 35 people around the table. And I was going in to talk about the future of books. And I look off to one side, and there's this mega speaker named Brian Tracy sitting over here. And he was kind of one of my idols growing up. I listened to a lot of Brian Tracy audios.
Yeah.
And then I look over on this side of the table, and there's a guy named Harvey Mackay who wrote a book back in 1988 called Swim with the Sharks Without Getting Eaten. I think it sold 5 million copies. And so, anyway, the people around the table are, you know, giant heavyweights in
Right.
terms of, selling books. And here I am, this guy, talking about the future of the business and how the physical book is going to come to an end because the ebook is coming and it's not wasteful and it's not this ancient technology that was built, 500 years ago. And then here we are many years later, and that ebook represents maybe, I don't know, 17% of sales right now. And the physical book, North America, is about 65% of sales. So, but the thing that does keep me awake is
Okay.
when is it gonna flip?
Right.
And in the words of Andy Grove, only the paranoid survive. I'm paranoid about this because I've seen it happen,
Right.
and I could see it happen super easy in the book industry. Now, it just so happens that people do like the feel of a physical book.
Yes.
They
Sure.
they like the way books smell.
Hmm.
They like the sound of your finger running over the pages,
Yeah.
and that I don't know if you can hear the sound of the
Yeah. We
pages being
can.
flipped,
Yeah.
but there's a
Yeah.
tactile element to a book that you just don't get with some of the digital derivatives. And
Yes.
that's why well over half of people in North America still enjoy the physical book.
And
Um,
I agree with that. I've seen out at the pools and everything like that, and beaches, that people are bringing actual books with them now instead of the e-readers that I used to see a few years ago that were so popular and being sold for Christmas gifts and everything. I see people actually bringing their actual books in their bags with them and actually holding the book open now again, where it wasn't like that a few years ago that at least that I noticed a few years ago. I really have seen a transition back to people bringing their own books and holding the books and, like you said, flipping the pages and really enjoying the books that way a little bit more.
yeah, yeah. Well, some of the things though that we're taking a look at, are AI related. So AI at the time we're recording this, it's maybe what 2 years old when it first came on. I'm making that up, but it's probably not too far off. Call it 2 years plus or minus, a year or two. Um, but we're leaning in hard to a lot of different AI tools. Some are internal focused,
Right.
so for our workflow. Some things are externally focused to the reader,
Okay.
and some things are creating some automation so we can do better advertising, so we can
Okay.
find more readers.
Okay.
So, one thing that we've been doing is that we have a technology now that enables us to do the work of an advertising agency running ads for books, specifically on Meta, meaning Facebook and Instagram.
Right.
We can automate that work and get a month's worth of ad agency work done in one day.
Wow.
And we can do our ad buys on Meta, and we can optimize those ad buys using an AI tool. And we've set it up as a Meta ad subscription service, and
Okay.
it's pretty sweet.
Okay.
The second thing that we've leaned into hard is curating manuscripts. So as a book publisher, we receive a lot of manuscripts. People
Okay.
contact us, they call us, they email us, they get in touch with us through friends and say, "Hey, I've written a book, and do you guys want to publish it?" Well,
Okay.
like I was telling you early, I feel guilty because I haven't read those 12 books sitting
Yeah.
on my bedside table. And those books make me salivate. I want to read them so bad,
Right.
right? And then I get 100 people sending me their manuscripts.
Mm.
So are the manuscripts any good? I, I don't know.
Right.
Um, do I want to pay somebody to read 100 manuscripts?
No.
No. But do I have to? Yep.
Yes.
Because, you know, I sell books for a living, so I gotta get all the new stuff that's coming in. So we've got an AI tool that will read a manuscript, create a what I call a gist report. Will tell me what the book is about,
Right. Right. Right.
tell me what the keywords are, um, and then tell me what the quality of the writing is. It'll give me an assessment on the quality of the writing.
Really?
Because for me to sell a book, I don't know if the writers are any good when they're sending
Mhm.
their manuscripts, and
Right.
some people are not. Some people could be the next Hemingway, right? And you know, but somebody's got to sort through all that.
Yeah.
So I've set up a tool that will assess the manuscript and tell me how good the writing is, and then will give me a summary, and then I'll take a look at all that, and then decide which ones I want to lean into.
Okay.
Okay.
So what is the percentage after using the tool and everything? What is usually the percentage out of that 100 that you get? And gotten your synopsis of it? How many of them actually come to fruition?
1%.
Okay.
And those are the numbers, and it's a harsh thing to say, but it just is what it is.
Okay. Well, I mean, you can't waste your
Um,
time on stuff that's not going to make you money as well.
yeah, and part of the equation too is, I flippantly use that Prince Harry analogy
Hmm.
because there's millions of people out there, or maybe even billions of people who know who he is, right? But when we look at new authors, we're looking for people that are known.
Yeah.
You know, maybe they're a podcaster like yourself,
Right.
or maybe they're big in social media, or maybe they've got a radio show, or maybe they're a YouTuber. I just signed a YouTuber last week.
Oh, nice.
Um, and yeah, this YouTuber's got 260,000 followers. And so I'm certainly going to lean into those 260,000 people and see if I can sell them some books.
Well, definitely.
Yeah.
Without a
So
doubt.
we're looking at stuff like that
Okay.
when we're trying to evaluate things.
Awesome.
Um, but a third thing, so I talked about the ad agency that we're
Mhm. Mhm.
uh, automating using AI. I'm talking about a like a submissions editor that we're automating using AI. But another thing, I mentioned our origin story where we've got thousands and thousands of audiobooks. I'm actually sitting in my audiobook recording studio right now, recording on a studio mic.
Okay.
Um, this, and we have people. I've got an author flying in. He's going to be here this weekend recording his audiobook, and this
Wow.
happens all the time here. But we've started leaning hard into using AI audiobook narration. And this is a horrible, horrible thing to say for the people that make a living recording audiobooks, because I know a lot of them personally.
Okay.
And we hire them all the time.
Hmm.
But the some books just don't warrant the expense of hiring a narrator.
Okay.
But I can record it using AI, and it's very cost efficient.
I'm
So
sure.
that's another thing that we're doing very aggressively. But the last thing that's actually kind of fun is, we you've heard of the so if you look at like an AI tool like Chat GPT, right?
Hmm. Yeah.
It's a what they call a large language model or an LLM that's been
Mhm.
trained on lots of information.
Yes.
And in fact, there's many authors suing them because that model was trained on copywritten material.
Hmm.
Okay,
Yes.
that's a whole nother discussion.
Yes, it
Um,
is.
but we've just created a new technology that is a small language model. It's not a large language model, it's a small language
Hmm.
model. So, what does that mean? Well, I can upload
Hmm.
one manuscript or two manuscripts or 10 manuscripts into an AI.
Hmm.
And when people interact with it, all the answers that they're getting are coming from the text in the book. We
Wow.
call it the talk to book feature.
Okay.
And then I can train the book to speak in the author's voice. So even though Zig's been dead for a decade, or he's passed away a decade ago,
Yeah.
I can put audio, if I license this from Ziegler's um,
Yes.
corporation, um, and then Zig's voice can answer questions about people saying, "Hey, um, Zig, you're synonymous with motivation, and I could really use some motivation right now. Can you tell me a story that will motivate me?" And then all of a sudden, Zig's voice comes and says, "Sure, I'd be happy to give you a motivational story. Let me tell you about the biscuits and the pump handles and the fleas." And he'll, go into a story that comes right from the book.
Yeah.
And then the person gets to hear that voice and that storytelling quality and all that. So this new talk to book feature is something that we're really excited about, and we're really looking forward to seeing what we can do with that.
And that was the next thing when we started with ChatGPT. In the back of my head, I was going to get to that question, but you already answered it for me. So I thought that was pretty cool, be able to get the rights to the voice and everything, and be able to use it in that scenario is going to be a turning point. And I think it's just the technology is just going to continue to grow in that direction. So it's very exciting to hear that y'all are taking it to the next level, and from the beginning of your growth has been in the forefront of figuring out what is the next steps, where are things going, and again, writing that book that was 10 years in advance of what it was is looking at it and everything. It just shows how much you've taken the opportunity and time to think through this process to make it, something that this company isn't going to go anywhere anytime soon and is going to be very successful. And that's the exciting part about talking to someone like yourself, and, giving those abilities to, think of ahead when you're in your business, looking at the numbers constantly, like you said, scratching your head, looking at things in a different light, what direction could we go? Ask the question, have a good partner, like you said, that can help you, evolve your business and help your business grow is all the things that are key in a great business. So
Yeah.
I just wanted to, before we close out, any final words you'd like to say?
Well, sure. I would suspect that, there's people out there that might have an interest in reading some of the books that are published by Made for Success.
Mhm.
So, we've got a catalog set up at madeforsuccess.com where people can, check out the books. We always love speaking with authors especially people who are trying to figure out how to get their books published, they can come to madeforsuccess.com and take a look at some of our publishing solutions and even send us a manuscript to have my machine read it. but but yeah, yeah, I would absolutely invite anybody that has an interest um, in publishing to come check us out.
Brian, thanks for being here. This is a fantastic conversation. A lot of great information. I think people can get, even people that aren't in the business, publishing business can use some of the things that you brought to light for their own business, to really think ahead, look at things in advance so that they can, be in the forefront of their own business. So hearing how Bill makes the publishing and insights you shared is about the future of publishing and entrepreneurship. Again, entrepreneurship again is very important. You kind of really touched on that. It's very important for the listeners who want more content from Brian and explore opportunities with publishing with Made Success. They can go to madesuccess.com and be able to, like you said, send manuscripts, purchase books, and any other things that's on his website. I also want to give Chris Widener, your partner, a shout out as thank goodness you all partnered with one another at the very beginning because I think it's been a great success story between the two of y'all. And
Mhm.
thanks for joining us on Founder Files, exploring the reality of building a scaled business and sustaining success. I'm Derek Briggs from Briggs Strategies, and thank you for your time. Anything else you'd like to share, Brian, before we get off here?
Derek, I really appreciate you having me on this show, and this is a fascinating conversation. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you. It was very exciting to me for me as well. Again, it gives me more insight for myself to look at different things, different ways as well. So thank you for your time, and I appreciate it very much.